Hi readers, it's Lori. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy that I'm back. It's been a lot of fun filming some content in the last couple of days and weeks, and so I'm going to keep up as long as I can. So today I'm going to talk to you about the books that I read in the month of November. I only had one physical copy of these books that I read, and that one is probably in that tree. So I can't show you that, but I will say that I enjoyed all of the reading that I did this last month in November. Um, and there was one that really stood out to me. So we'll talk about that. So let's get started. So the first book I started in November was Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. It was a book of the month selection for me a few months ago. It's a historical fiction. It has two different timelines, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It's a challenging topic. So it follows this Black woman. Her name is Sybil Townsend, and her father is also a doctor, and she's a new nurse, and she gets a job at this like community clinic where they do home visits, and there's a number of them that are engaged and sent out to work with different families, and she's sent out to work with these young girls who were in a really awful home situation in terms of, not in terms of parenting, but in terms of poverty, and they're just a terrible living situation. And she sort of takes it upon herself to support and help these girls. And then she discovers that one of the other nurses, who's her supervisor in the clinic, has made a decision on behalf of these girls that is life changing. And she is so mad, and she advocates for these girls and for their rights, and tries to find them better living arrangements. And just honestly, this book was amazing in its topic. Not easy reading. So it's interesting because I used to kind of do this work, although not on the medical side, but on the caring side and advocacy and home, finding homes for people side years ago. And so I'm not shocked necessarily by what happened to these girls, but it's still heartbreaking, and it was still very poignant, very well done. It really involves a number of people, and they all kind of come together, and it was a feel good story, and also a really get in your feelings story. But I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I started The Girls at 17 Swan Street by Yara Zeeb, I think is how you say her name. Zabe, maybe. This one was given to me by NetGalley upon request. I mean, they sent it out, and I said, sure, I'd like to read a copy of that. And that was a long time ago, probably a couple of years ago. It was one of the first books I was ever gifted by NetGalley, and I just never read it. I feel terrible about that, but I'm trying to get back to my NetGalley reads in the next year. So this was the start of that. So this follows a girl named Anna Rue. She's this girl who has this great love story with her husband. She moves from Paris with him to Missouri because of his work, but along the way somehow it's revealed to him, and she tries really hard to keep it a secret. She has an eating disorder. She's anorexic, and he finally intervenes, and she goes into this place, this treatment place, which is at 17 Swan Street, with other girls who are going through the same treatment. And then they're all in different stages. Some have been there for a really long time, and some have been released, and some are just coming in. But it follows her story. It follows kind of the trajectory of her love story and where she was before the anorexia, and then how it kind of developed, and how she tried to hide it, and it's great because it really shows what her experience was, and then also what the experience of her husband and her father was and her family was. And it shows her in the treatment. It shows her, making friends with other people and their fragility in this space, and hers and her emotional changes and inability to cope with some of this, and to be forced to eat food that she didn't want to, and how much she was focusing on food. And it was just so well done. I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And thanks again to NetGalley for providing me with an advanced reader's copy of this book that I didn't read until it had been out for quite some time. It has a total rating on Goodreads of 3.98, so just at under 4 stars, which means it's very well liked by other readers as well. So I highly recommend that. Then I got a nonfiction read in called Waypoints: My Scottish Journey by Sam Heughan. Sam Heughan is an actor who plays the character of Jamie Fraser on the Outlander series. And the Outlander series of books is one that I started reading pretty much when they first came out. I'm still getting through that series. I'm on the second to the most current book now. So Waypoints is the story of a number of waypoints in his life. So he sets out at the beginning of this book to go on a walk, a pretty significant walk. There's one in Scotland. There's one there's several of the El Camino you may have heard of, and different things that other authors have written about these walks as well. And I do enjoy reading books about this kind of stamina that's required to engage in these kinds of things. But he's going to camp, and he's going to, be out in nature, and he's, doing this on a break from filming, and he's very excited about it. And he's kind of a rugged looking guy. So you figure he's going to do okay. And he struggles a bit with this particular walk. But also he then tells the stories of other waypoints in his life where he was either struggling or transitioning or moving, or, kind of as he was growing up, his father and mother did not stay married. He talks about his school days and his entry into acting. And then he talks about his kind of journey into being discovered, and some of his relationships, and just, different things in his life that really were significant in his mind, to share along the route of this walk. I gave this one 3 stars, and I had a little challenge with a couple of things. I had a challenge with the fact that he would go from one waypoint in the current time that he was walking to the waypoint in the other time. And because it was an audio book, there wasn't a transition like you would have from chapter to chapter. I don't know how it looks in the printed version, certainly, so I can't say, but I would assume that maybe those would have a break of some sort, like, in the text. Whereas the audiobook, it was him narrating it. And so there was just no real break. And so you would be just listening and all of a sudden realize, oh, you weren't on the walking trail anymore. You were in his high school days, or you were in his flat in, somewhere wherever he lived, or you were suddenly in New York when he was auditioning or something. So it was just a little bulky in the transition on audio, but it may be very different if you read it as a physical copy. And it was fine. It was good. I enjoyed it. It wasn't anything like, oh my gosh, this was the best book I've ever read. Although a lot of people have said that in the Goodreads comments. I noticed it's very well loved. So that's interesting to me too. Is like that. I think there's a lot of Sam Heughan fans, and I am a Sam Heughan fan too. I really like him a lot. And I looked at this in terms of his life, and it was interesting, and I enjoyed it, and I finished it. It didn't take me too long to read it. I read it in a few days, as I recall, but it's rated 4.48 on Goodreads, so it's very well loved. But I got it on Libro, and so I have it, if I want to listen to it again. And I might do that in a couple of years and see if I have a different reaction to it then. But I will say I struggled with keeping up with where I was in his life, whether I was in the past or the present. And then finally, I read on Scribd, or listened to, I take that back. I listened to on Scribd, which was really fantastic. 2 short novels or novellas by Daphne du Maurier. One is The Birds, and well, it's in a compilation called The Birds and Don't Look Now. So those are the two stories. The Birds, which was made into an Alfred Hitchcock movie, and Don't Look Now are both short stories or novellas that were written by Daphne du Maurier, and they are on an Audible or an audio version on Scribd. So The Birds has always been a favorite movie of mine, but I had never read the novella. And listening to it was incredible. I will say it's a very scary movie. It's not quite as scary. The audio is not quite as scary, or the book is not quite as scary to me as the movie is, but it is very compelling. It's definitely it was definitely a fun ride for me. The Birds is a novella that is about a family on an island that discovers that some birds are starting to exhibit some strange behaviors, and then there are more of them, and it happens pretty. So the movie kind of slowly comes into this space of the growing concern about these birds, with one or two, and then lots, and then more and more and more. The novella kind of starts out with a bang, and there's tons of them, and how they're reacting to them, and what the birds are doing to their homes and to their community, and then it ends really abruptly too. So I wouldn't say it was my favorite by Daphne du Maurier, but again, it's kind of my favorite. It's one of my favorite horror movies, so I enjoyed it. And there was some, if I remember, there was some audio, there was some scary music that was inserted into the audio, which made it kind of fun. I would definitely recommend the movie over the novella. Don't Look Now, I knew nothing about. I don't know if it's been made into a movie or not. It was originally published in 1971, so it's not terribly old, but it follows a couple who are on holiday in Venice, and they meet these women, and one of the women is a psychic, and they are on this holiday because they've had a tragedy in their lives, and the woman was having a lot of difficulty recovering from that. And so this psychic says something to her, and some things start to happen that are pretty unique, and sort of you feel like there's something sinister happening. I loved this. I loved it even more than the Birds, honestly, and probably because I know what's going to happen in the Birds. So, that wasn't a bit of a surprise. But Don't Look Now, being fresh and new to me, was really good. It's a perfect, like, Hitchcockian plot if it hasn't been made into a movie, and I am going to look and see if it has. But it was really nice. It was really shorter, I think, than the Birds, but I wanted kind of more of it, but I also could sort of see it in my mind as I was listening to it, which I always really appreciate when I'm listening to something new and listening to something that's kind of a thriller, and especially kind of a gothic turn to it. Really nice. I love Daphne du Maurier. I want to read more of her work as well in this new year, because she's an author that I have always really appreciated. So I really recommend this duo on Scribd if you have access to Scribd or somewhere else where they feature audiobooks, because these are really pretty neat. Okay, so that was my November reading wrap up. Even though it is the middle of December, I'm going to share that with you now. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you've read any of these or listened to any of these, I'd be curious about what you thought about them as well. And maybe I feel a little guilty. I probably knocked Sam Hewen's rating down from what would be much higher than almost 4.5 stars. But but it is what it is. I mean, you either like a book a lot or you don't. And I just didn't like it a lot. I just liked it. So that, there's that. But thanks for joining me. I appreciate your comments and feedback. I'm happy that you're watching me again. I'm really happy again to be back. And as always, happy reading. Bye.